Welcome to Motivational Humanity. You are not alone.
There's a name you carry with you. You don't say it out loud much anymore. But it's there, in the quiet moment before sleep, when the house goes still and you're left alone with your own thoughts. It might be a person who betrayed you. A sister who said something unforgivable at your mother's funeral, a husband who left, a friend who disappeared without explanation, a child who turned away. Or maybe, and this is the one nobody talks about, it's your own name you're carrying. The weight of something you did or didn't do years ago. The you that you've never quite forgiven? That weight. You know what I mean, don't you? It doesn't always feel like weight. Sometimes it disguises itself. It walks around in your body wearing different costumes, exhaustion that no amount of sleep fixes, a low-grade tension in your chest, a flinch when someone mentions that person's name at a family dinner. Sometimes it feels like righteousness, a cold, clean anger that you've polished so many times it almost gleams. I have every right to feel this way. And you do. You absolutely do. What happened to you was real. The hurt was real. The betrayal was real. But here's the quiet truth I want to sit with you in for just a moment. That anger, as justified as it is, has been living inside your body like a house guest who never leaves. And while it started as yours, as something that made you feel protected, it's been eating at the table of your peace for years, maybe decades. And you've been the one cooking the meals. I want to be careful here because I know what forgiveness looks like when it's used as a weapon. I've seen it, maybe you have too. Someone pats your hand and says, "Oh, honey, you just need to forgive and forget." As if the pain were a coffee stain you could blot out with a paper towel. As if the years of your life that were shaped and sometimes shattered by what someone else did could just be tidied away. As if forgiveness meant going back, pretending, excusing, that version of forgiveness. We're not talking about that today. What I want to talk about is something older and quieter, something that lives closer to you, not to them. Because here's what nobody tells you when you're in the thick of grief and anger. Forgiveness has almost nothing to do with the other person. It's an act you perform for the woman standing in the mirror. It's a way of unclenching something deep in your chest that has been held so tightly for so long that you've forgotten what it felt like to breathe all the way in. And for women of our generation, women who were raised to hold families together, to swallow the hard things, to be gracious and composed, to put everyone else's comfort before our own, forgiveness is complicated by something extra, because we weren't just hurt. Often, we were hurt and then expected to be fine about it. Hurt and then handed a casserole dish and told to show up to Sunday dinner. Hurt and then told, maybe not in words, but in every unspoken rule of the world we grew up in, that making peace was our job, that the emotional labor belonged to us. No wonder forgiveness tastes bitter. No wonder so many of us are still carrying the name, the moment, the thing that happened in 1987 or 1994 or 2011, like a stone in the pocket of every room we walk into. So before we go anywhere else, I want you to hear this. The fact that you haven't forgiven yet doesn't make you broken. It doesn't make you bitter. Though the world may have called you that, it makes you human. It means you felt something real, you valued something real, and losing it, or having it taken, left a mark. That mark is not a character flaw. It's evidence that you loved. But here's what I've come to understand. Through my own long detours, through anger and grief, and through years of sitting with women in their most honest moments. There comes a day when the energy it takes to keep the wound open starts costing more than the energy it would take to begin, slowly and perfectly to let it close, not for them. Never because they deserve it, but because you deserve to stop bleeding. That's where we begin. Let me ask you something, and I want you to really sit with it before you answer. When you think about that person, that situation, does it feel like you're holding them? Or does it feel like they're holding you? Most of us, if we're honest, have to pause at that question. Because what started as our grip, our righteous, protective, completely understandable grip on the story of what was done to us, has somewhere along the way reversed itself. And now the story is the one doing the holding. We didn't notice when it happened. These things never announce themselves. One day you're a woman with a wound, and somewhere between then and now, You've become a woman who organizes her whole interior life around that wound without even realizing it. Psychologists have a name for this. They call it rumination. But that word is too clinical, too detached. It doesn't capture what it actually feels like. What it actually feels like is a groove. A worn path in your mind that your thoughts return to automatically, the way water finds the same channel after every rain. You're not choosing to go there. You just end up there, washing dishes, driving to the pharmacy, lying in the quiet dark at 3 in the morning. And suddenly you're back in that room, that conversation, that moment. Rehearsing what you should have said, rewriting the ending that never came. And here's the cruelest part of that groove. Every time you travel it, you're not just remembering the hurt. Your nervous system doesn't know the difference between memory and present experience. When you replay the betrayal, your body responds as if it's happening now. Your cortisol rises. Your heart rate shifts. Your muscles carry a low, almost imperceptible tension, a readiness to defend. You are, in the most biological sense, re-experiencing the wound. And again, while they, in all likelihood, are not thinking about you at all. I know that's hard to hear. I'm not saying it to wound you further. I'm saying it because I think somewhere, underneath everything, you already know it. The person who hurt you has moved on. Maybe they justified what they did. Maybe they rewrote the story so they came out looking fine. Maybe they genuinely forgot. And here you are, years later, still attending to their damage like a loyal caretaker of someone else's wreckage. That's not justice. That's not even punishment. That's just loss. One more loss, quietly accumulated on top of the original one. Now, and this is important, I'm not saying this to shame you into forgiving. Shame has never healed anything. Not once. In the entire history of human emotion, has someone been shamed into genuine peace? What I'm saying is this: when we understand why we hold on, the holding starts to loosen just a little on its own. Not because we willed it to, but because understanding brings a kind of compassion for the situation, yes, but more importantly, for ourselves. So why do we hold on? Part of it is protection. When someone causes us real harm, our psyche makes a perfectly reasonable calculation. Remember this: stay alert. Don't let it happen again. The anger becomes a kind of early warning system, a sentinel standing at the edge of our peace, scanning the horizon. For a while, that serves us. In the immediate aftermath of betrayal, anger is actually functional. It gives us clarity. It gives us the energy to make changes, set boundaries, leave rooms we should have left sooner. But sentinels are exhausting. They don't sleep. And when we keep one standing long past the danger, when we're still on high alert 5 years, 15 years later, what was once protection becomes something closer to a prison. We've built walls to keep them out, and we've accidentally locked ourselves inside. There's another piece to this, one that women especially carry, and it lives in a quieter place. Sometimes we hold on because the wound is all that's left of something we loved. The anger is grief in disguise. If we let go of the bitterness toward the friend who abandoned us, we have to feel the full weight of the friendship we lost. If we stop being furious at the man who left, we have to mourn the marriage, the future we imagined, the woman we were when we believed in it. The anger keeps us from the softer, more devastating grief underneath. Holding on can feel like holding something, and grief can feel like holding nothing at all. But here's what I want you to consider. That grief, the real grief beneath the anger, it's not a bottomless pit. I know it can feel that way. I know when you catch a glimpse of the sadness under the fury, every instinct says don't go in there, you'll never come back. But that's fear talking. That's the part of us that equates feeling with drowning. In reality, grief moves. Anger, held long enough without resolution, calcifies. It becomes part of the architecture, a load-bearing wall you've built your whole interior life around. But grief, when we finally allow it, moves through us like weather. It comes in, it is ferocious and tender and real, and then if we let it, it passes. Not once and forever. Grief doesn't work that way. But it passes enough. It passes enough that on the other side of it, there is room. Room that the anger was filling up. Quiet space that was yours all along. And there's one more reason we hold on. Maybe the most overlooked one. Sometimes unforgiveness is where we store our self-worth. If what they did was wrong, and it was, then our anger is the proof. Our refusal to forgive is the evidence that we matter, that what happened to us mattered, that we are not someone to be treated that way and simply smile and move on. To forgive feels, in some deep wordless place, like admitting it was acceptable, like saying it didn't matter after all. But forgiveness isn't a verdict on the past. It's not you standing in a courtroom saying, "I find you not guilty." It's you standing in your own life saying, "I refuse to let this case define the rest of my years." Those are completely different things. And that distinction, really feeling it in your bones, is where the whole conversation about forgiveness has to begin. So we've named the wound, we've sat with why we hold on. And maybe something has shifted just slightly, a small loosening. A crack of light under a door you'd forgotten was there. Now comes the part where most conversations about forgiveness go wrong. Because this is usually where someone hands you a list. 5 steps to forgiveness. A tidy little roadmap with numbered milestones and a finish line. And I want to be honest with you, that's not what this is. Forgiveness isn't a checklist you complete once and file away. It's not a single dramatic moment where you close your eyes, say the words, and feel the weight lift cleanly off your shoulders. Sometimes it is a moment, sometimes grace arrives exactly like that, sudden and inexplicable. But for most of us, most of the time, forgiveness is a practice. A direction we choose to walk in, not a destination we arrive at. It's more like tending a garden than crossing a finish line. And some days, you're going to go backwards. You'll think you've made peace with something, and then a song will play, or someone will say a name, or you'll find an old photograph, and you'll feel it rise back up in you, fresh and fierce as ever. That doesn't mean you've failed. That doesn't mean the work you've done was wasted. It means you're human, tending to something real, in the deeply nonlinear way that all real healing actually moves. So let's talk about what the practice actually looks like, not as prescription, as possibility. The first thing, and this is the one that quietly changes everything, is separating the person from the pain, not excusing them, not softening what they did, but recognizing that most people who hurt us weren't sitting in a room somewhere, carefully planning your undoing. Most of them were operating from their own wounds, their own limitations, their own blind spots and fears and survival strategies. That doesn't make what they did acceptable. It doesn't mean you owe them understanding, but when you can begin to see them as a limited, flawed, fully human person, rather than a villain whose entire purpose was to harm you, something shifts. The story gets more complicated, and complicated stories have more room in them. More room for you, and strangely more room to eventually let go. I think of a woman I'll call Margaret. Not her real name, but her story belongs to so many of you. Margaret's daughter-in-law had, over the course of a decade, slowly pushed her out of her grandchildren's lives. Small exclusions at first, then larger ones. Until one Christmas, Margaret sat in her own home, knowing her grandchildren were 30 minutes away and she had not been invited. The anger she carried toward that woman was the kind of anger that has roots. Deep, tangled, justified roots. But Margaret, in one of the bravest moments I've ever witnessed, said something I've never forgotten. She said, "I finally asked myself, what kind of woman pushes away a grandmother who loves her grandchildren? What kind of fear must be living inside of her to need that much control?" And then she paused and said, "I don't excuse it, but I pity it." And the pity, it was lighter to carry than the rage. That's not weakness. That's a woman who decided her peace was worth more than her position in the argument. The second piece of the practice, and this one is specifically for those of you carrying self-forgiveness, is learning to extend to yourself the same mercy you'd offer a dear friend. Here's an exercise I want you to try, not as a performance, but as a genuine experiment. Think of whatever it is you haven't forgiven yourself for, the thing you've rehearsed and prosecuted so many times in your own internal courtroom. Now imagine, truly imagine, that a woman you love deeply, your closest friend, your daughter, your sister, came to you and said that she had done that same thing. That she'd made that same mistake, that same choice, lived through that same chapter. What would you say to her? You wouldn't say what you say to yourself. I'm almost certain of that. You'd say, you were doing the best you could with what you knew then. You'd say, that was a different time, a different you. You'd say, you've paid enough. You've carried this long enough. It's time to put it down. So why? Why is she worth that mercy and you are not? This is the unspoken truth that lives at the center of so much women's suffering. We are exquisitely generous with grace toward everyone except ourselves. We will make excuses for the people who hurt us before. We will make space for our own imperfection. And the practice of self-forgiveness begins quietly and without fanfare in that gap. In the moment you decide to speak to yourself the way you would speak to someone you love. The third piece is the one nobody warns you about. Grief has to have somewhere to go. You cannot skip it and arrive at forgiveness. You can perform forgiveness. You can say the words. You can decide to stop being angry. But if the grief underneath hasn't been acknowledged, if you haven't sat with the loss of what you wanted, what you deserved, what you will not get back, then the forgiveness is a coat hung over a wound. It looks fine from the outside, but underneath, it's still bleeding. So give yourself permission to grieve, not to wallow. There's a difference, and you already know the difference in your body. Wallowing circles. Grief moves forward, even when it's painful. Grieve the relationship you deserved and didn't get. Grieve the apology that never came and likely never will. Grieve the version of yourself that existed before the wound, before the worriness, before you learned to hold people at a certain careful distance. She was real, that earlier version of you. Her trust was real. What was done to that trust was real. She deserves to be mourned. And here's something that surprised me when I first truly understood it. Grieving that loss doesn't mean the wound wins. It means you win. Because you're finally telling yourself the truth about what happened. You're no longer minimizing it to stay functional or inflating it to stay protected. You're just letting it be what it was. True and past. The fourth piece, and this may be the most practical, the most actionable, is choosing the story you live in going forward. Not rewriting what happened. Not pretending it was fine. But deciding what role it plays in the story of your life from here. There's a version of your story in which the betrayal, the wound, the person who hurt you, is the central event. Everything radiates out from that. It defines the chapters before it and after it. It is the sun that your whole narrative orbits. And there's another version, not a lesser version, not a version that erases what happened, in which that wound is part of your story, real and true, and part of the landscape of a life fully lived, a chapter, a season. One of the things that shaped you, without being the thing that defines you. You get to choose which version you live in, not all at once, not without backsliding, but you get to choose. That choice, quiet, daily, sometimes made again at 3 a.m, is the practice of forgiveness. Not a single act of grace. 1,000 small decisions to not let the wound be the whole story. I want to tell you something that I don't think gets said nearly enough. You may never feel ready. There may never be a morning when you wake up and the conditions feel right. When the hurt has faded to just the right degree, when the other person has finally shown enough remorse, when you feel strong enough, healed enough, certain enough to take the step. That morning may not come. And if you're waiting for it, if you've been waiting for it, I want to gently, lovingly tell you that the waiting itself has become part of the wait. Readiness, in the territory of forgiveness, is not a feeling that arrives before the choice. It's a feeling that arrives because of the choice. You don't feel ready and then forgive. You forgive imperfectly, incompletely, with trembling hands and a heart that isn't entirely sure. And then, slowly, in the weeks and months that follow, you feel what readiness actually was. You feel it in retrospect as relief. This is important because so many of us have been standing at the edge of this for years, telling ourselves I'm not ready yet. And what we really mean underneath that is I'm afraid. Afraid that forgiving means forgetting. Afraid that it means they won. Afraid that if we release the anger, we release the last tether to something we once loved and lost. Afraid of who will be on the other side, because we've been this version of ourselves, the one holding on, for so long that we've forgotten there was ever another version. But here's what I want you to know about the other side, not as a promise of perfection, not as a guarantee, but as a quiet, honest description of what women who have walked this path tell me again and again in their own words. They say the first thing they notice is space. Not dramatic, not thunderclap, just space. A kind of interior room they hadn't realized was occupied. like a constant low noise that you've lived with so long you stopped hearing it, until the day it finally goes quiet and you stand very still and think, oh. So that's what silence actually sounds like. The body notices before the mind does. Shoulders that have been carrying something, not pain exactly, more like readiness, like vigilance, begin tentatively to soften. Sleep changes. Not immediately, not all at once, but the 3 a.m. wakefulness, the kind where thoughts circle and rehearse and re-prosecute, it begins to ease. The mind, slowly, has fewer fires to tend. This is not nothing. This is not a small thing. We live in our bodies for the whole of our lives, and what we carry emotionally, we carry physically too. The research on this is unambiguous now. Chronic resentment and unresolved grief have measurable effects on our immune function, our cardiovascular health, our inflammation levels, our very cells. Your unforgiveness isn't just a matter of the spirit. It is, in the most literal sense, something your body has been paying for. And when you begin to set it down, when you begin, in your own imperfect, halting way, to choose the direction of release, your body begins, quietly, to exhale. There's something else they describe, the women who've come through this. Something harder to articulate, but I think you'll recognize it when I try. They describe a kind of return to themselves. A woman who has organized years of her emotional life around a wound, even unconsciously, even while living fully and loving people and doing the work of her days. A part of her has been elsewhere, attending to the old story, managing the old feeling, standing guard over the old injury. And when that vigil finally ends, something comes home. It's subtle. It's not a reunion with some idealized former self from before the hurt happened. You can't go back there, and you wouldn't want to, not really. That earlier version of you didn't know what you know now. But something of your attention, your full, present, undivided attention, comes back to your own life, to your own morning, your own cup of coffee, your own particular slant of light coming through the kitchen window at 7 a.m. The present moment gets fuller, because you are finally actually in it. And then there's this, and I saved this for last, because I think it's the most sacred part of what forgiveness ultimately gives back to us. Capacity. When the heart has been held in a fist for a long time, even a loving heart begins to cramp. The very muscles that once opened wide, to trust, to joy, to new connection, to the particular wild vulnerability of letting someone matter to you. Those muscles grow stiff with disuse. We think we're protecting ourselves. And we are. But protection has a shadow side. Every wall that keeps pain out also keeps warmth in. Every distance we keep from the person who hurt us is also, in some quiet, collateral way, a distance we keep from everyone else. Women who've done this work describe something opening. Not naively, not recklessly. Not the wide open, undiscerning trust of someone who hasn't yet been hurt. Something wiser than that, and more beautiful than that, a chosen openness. A decision made with full knowledge of the cost to remain available to life. To remain someone who can still be surprised by kindness, still moved by beauty, still willing. Against all the evidence that love sometimes fails to love. That's not weakness. That is among the most courageous things a human being can do. And I want to say something directly to you. If you've been sitting with a particular name this whole time, a particular face, a particular moment from a particular year that you've carried without putting down, you don't have to call them. You don't have to write a letter. You don't have to tell them you've forgiven them, or arrange a conversation, or offer them anything at all. Forgiveness is not a transaction that requires their participation. It's not something you hand to them. It's something you give back to yourself. The freedom from this is not theirs to grant. It was always yours to take. And you've earned it. Lord, you have earned it. Every year you kept getting up. Every morning you showed up for your life despite the ache of it. Every moment you chose kindness or humor or grace while carrying something no one else could fully see. That was not weakness, and it was not wasted, and it was not nothing. It was you. Surviving something real with everything you had. But surviving is not the same as living, and living fully presently. With your whole chest open to whatever this next chapter holds, that requires putting down what survival needed you to carry. So here, in this quiet moment, wherever you are reading or listening to this, I want to offer you something. Not a 5-step plan, not a resolution you have to make and keep perfectly. Just a single small permission. You are allowed to be done. Done re-prosecuting the case. Done maintaining the vigil. Done giving the best of your interior life to someone or something from the past. Done letting the wound be the loudest voice in the room. You are allowed to take back your own story. Not because they deserve it. Not because the hurt wasn't real. Not because you have to pretend a single moment of it was okay. But because you exactly as you are, exactly where you are, with everything you've been through and survived and carried. You deserve to find out what your life feels like when it belongs entirely to you again. That's what forgiveness is, not a gift to them. A sanctuary finally for you.